Thank you for being here with us today. I am Quinn Purcell.
And I'm Sarah Sullivan. We are teaching artists with Rising Youth Theater, and we are so excited to share a session with you today based on one of our favorite books, Chris van Allsburg's The Mysteries of Harris Burdick. If you don't know about these mysteries, you can check the link in the video description or the session plan for more information. However, you don't need to do that in order to participate.
And now we are going to step into role. So for the rest of the session, we are not Sarah and Quinn teaching artists, but rather we are Quinn, investigative journalist determined to get to the bottom of the Burdick mystery once and for all.
And Sarah, the archivist who was promised to hold and protect the documents left by Mr. Burdick.
We all know the story of Harris Burdick and his mysterious left-behind images. I first heard about the Burdick drawings when I was a kid, and I always believed that there was something else, something we didn't know, some strange truth left behind in these seemingly unbelievable images. Were these stories really just the imagination of a creative and brilliant mind? Or were they something more, something true, something impossible? I'm Quinn Purcell, and this is the Burdick Report, a new podcast that will look at these familiar pictures and the stories behind them in a whole new way. To get started, I spoke with Sarah Sullivan, librarian and archivist to Peter Wender's former publisher, and the person who first discovered Harris Burdick's stories. She has been caring for and protecting the collection for the past 11 years.
If you don't know the story of the Burdick drawings, I'll tell you. The drawings were left to me by my former employer, Mr. Peter Wenders. 30 years ago, a man called at Peter Wender's office, introducing himself as Harris Burdick. Mr. Burdick explained that he had written 14 stories and drawn pictures for each one. He'd brought with him just one drawing from each story to see if Wenders liked his work. Peter Wenders was fascinated by the drawings. He told Burdick he would like to read the stories that went with them as soon as possible. The artist agreed. He said he would bring the stories the next morning. He left the 14 drawings with Wenders, but he did not return the next day, or the day after that, or the day after that. Harris Burdick was never heard from again. Over the years, Wenders tried to figure out who Burdick was and what happened to him, but he discovered nothing. To this day, Harris Burdick and the stories he left behind remain a complete mystery. When he died, Peter Wenders entrusted me with the secrets left behind, and I take that very seriously.
Do you believe that the rest of the stories are out there?
I do. But there's a reason that Harris Burdick didn't bring all of the stories to Mr. Wenders originally. If it was just about getting the stories published, he would have brought everything.
So why didn't he?
I can't know that. I wasn't there.
The more people I talked to, the more mysterious the story seemed. Everyone seems to feel that there was more to the story, but nobody seems to know what. So now, I'm bringing it to you, the listeners of the Burdick Report. What really happened? The first image, Archie Smith, boy wonder. A tiny voice asked, "Is he the one?" So Sarah, what do you notice about this image?
Well, I've just always found the lights coming in through the window to be so striking. What are they? Who are they representing? Where are they coming from? What about you?
I'm really interested in the point of view of this image. I can tell that we're in the corner of this boy's room, and I feel like looking at this image, I am standing among the people who are asking, is he the one? If you're listening at home, what do you notice about this image? What stands out to you? What is striking to you? What's mysterious? The second image, under the rug. 2 weeks passed and it happened again. So what stands out to you about this picture?
Well, there's just clearly some kind of threat happening here. And I've always wondered, what is there? What is happening that's causing so much distress for this man? Is it something typical in his home or something else? What about you?
I think I'm wondering the same thing. I'm wondering what is under the rug. I'm wondering what it's doing that is so distressing. And I'm also wondering more about the man himself. Does he live alone? Um, is he afraid or is he just irritated?
Mm.
What is this man's story? Again, listeners, if you're following along with us, what do you notice about this image? What is mysterious? The third image. A strange day in July. He threw with all his might, but the third stone came skipping back. Sarah, what stands out to you about this image?
Well, there's something so joyful about this one. And I think that the position of the lights and the position of the stones, so many of the Burdick images feel threatening, where this one feels like it's full of possibilities in an interesting way.
I think that I am interested in this story that the caption sets up, um, and about the stone coming back to the boy. And I'm also interested in the other person in this image because the story only mentions the boy, but he has someone else with him. Listeners, what do you notice about this image? The next image, missing in Venice. Even with her mighty engines in reverse, the ocean liner was pulled further and further into the canal. Sarah, what is striking to you about this image?
Well, when you look at this image, at first it seems normal, and then you realize it's not. You realize the scale and the tightness of the canal. Uh, and I think I'm curious, what are all of the people thinking in these houses, on the ship? What is happening in their minds right now?
I am struck by how almost claustrophobic it feels to look at this image, just the way that the ship is wedged in these buildings. And I'm also struck by the darkness on the bottom two-thirds of the image and how stark it is next to the top of the boat. Um, it looks like you're just peering into this deep, deep darkness. Listeners, what are you noticing about this image? The next image, another place, another time. If there was an answer, he'd find it there. Sarah, what is interesting to you about this image?
Well, certainly this is one of the most iconic of the Burdick images, and this idea of the possibilities and what lies beyond. Um, what is the answer they're looking for? Where have they been looking? And what lies beyond these train tracks? What about you?
I think something that is very interesting and mysterious for me is simply the image of the train tracks in the middle of this body of water. It feels so isolated, and yet there's this one like connection point and one path forward. And it's very interesting. It feels like these tracks are really important. Listeners, what do you notice about this image? What's interesting to you? The next image, uninvited guest. His heart was pounding. He was sure he had seen the doorknob turn. Sarah, what do you notice about this image?
Well, the first thing that I notice is the scale. How small the door is. What could that be for? There's so many mundane things in this image, the skate, the rug up against the wall, but then something about the idea of a turning doorknob makes it seem somehow sinister or at least mysterious. What do you notice?
I notice, similar to the first image, it feels like from this point of view, we're sort of hiding in the corner of this image. Um, and I think based on the story that it gives us, we're um, this person that they're describing who's afraid of whatever just turned the drum. And so it feels very immersive to look at it, and it also feels very creepy. Listeners, what do you notice about this image? What's striking to you? The next image, the harp. So it's true, he thought. It's really true. Sarah, what is striking to you about this image?
I think it's the natural imagery that feels particularly striking to me. Where are we? What are the significance of the trees and the rocks? And what truth are we discovering here? And is it connected to the larger mystery of the Burdick drawings? What about you?
I'm wondering about the significance of the harp itself. So, why a harp? Why a musical instrument at all? But also just at the image of mostly nature with this human made object just sort of in the corner of the image, barely even noticeable. Listeners, what strikes you about this image? What is mysterious to you? The next image, Mr. Linden's library. He had warned her about the book. Now it was too late. Sarah, what do you notice about this image?
I've always been drawn to this image, and there's so much that I wonder about here. What was the warning she received? What is happening in the book? And what has happened to this girl? I'm particularly struck by the leaves and again, the return to the natural environment that comes up in this image.
When I look at this image, I'm also struck by the book, and I'm also finding myself wondering what happened to this girl. But I'm also finding myself wondering what is happening in the darkness behind her. There's something about it that I can't put my finger on, but it feels to me like there's something lurking behind her in this image. Listeners, what do you notice about this image of the girl and the book? The next image, the 7 chairs. The fifth one ended up in France. Sarah, what strikes you about this image?
I'm just really fascinated by the power dynamic in this image. And what does it mean to have the nun floating up high, the two men watching? Where are they now? And what caused the chair to end up in France, to end up wherever they ended up? There's so many questions here.
I am also wondering about the other chairs, about where they ended up. Um, I'm wondering why this nun, why these people? Is it significant, the people that the chairs are interacting with? Listeners, what is interesting to you about this image? The next image, the third floor bedroom. It all began when someone left the window open. Sarah, what do you notice about this image?
Well, this image is striking to me because you almost don't notice what's changing here. And you see the wing of the bird starting to peel off of the wallpaper. And what happened to this bird? What makes this bird different?
I am also wondering what is coming in through the window. Even though it feels like the birds should be leaving the room, something about the way the curtains are moving and are being pushed into the room, even though you can't see anything, it feels like some force or some energy is coming into this room. Listeners, what do you notice about this image? What is intriguing to you? The next image, just dessert. She lowered the knife and it grew even brighter. Sarah, what is intriguing to you about this image?
I'm wondering what is going on in her mind. Is she expecting this to happen? Or is it startling to her? I can't tell, and I'm so curious.
I'm also very interested in this woman. I find her eyes are so interesting to me. They have this glazed and sort of dazed out look. And I'm also interested to know why is it getting brighter? Is she controlling it, or is it just some sort of external reaction that she has no control over? Listeners, what do you notice about this image? What is striking to you? The next image, Captain Torrey. He swung his lantern 3 times, and slowly the scooter appeared. Sarah, what do you notice about this image?
Again, in this image, I'm wondering about the people. Which of these people is Captain Torrey? Who brought them here? And what are they waiting for?
I'm wondering what's happening on that boat. Is it just cargo? Is it people? Is there something mysterious happening on that boat that maybe we shouldn't know about? Listeners, what strikes you about this image? What's intriguing to you? The next image, Oscar and Alphonse. She knew it was time to send them back. The caterpillars softly wiggled in her hand, spelling out goodbye. Sarah, what strikes you about this image?
I find myself looking at the girl's face and the care and concern that she's showing to these caterpillars. And I'm wondering what her connection is to them and how she's able to communicate.
I am also wondering about her connection to the caterpillars. I'm wondering how they view her and why they feel the need to say goodbye, how they are able to say goodbye and communicate with her. I'm wondering who is in control here as well. Listeners, what do you notice about this image? What do you find mysterious about it? The last image, the house on Maple Street. It was a perfect liftoff. Sarah, what do you notice about this image?
I think the thing I find the most striking about this image is how peaceful everything looks surrounding the house as it leaves the ground. There's a light on inside. What do the people inside know?
I'm wondering about who has control over this house. Is there someone inside causing it to lift off? Is there some external force that's lifting it? Or is it the house itself? Listeners, what are you noticing about this image? What do you find striking and mysterious? So now I'm relying on you. We don't have information, so we need you to help us figure out the whole story. We're asking you, our listeners, to write the full stories behind these images. What really happened? The images themselves are all in the show notes. That is, they're linked in the digital session file provided to you. And we'll share them here with some music for you to write to. Write 1 story or 10, but please share them with us. Put them on social media with the hashtag #CreativityIsNotCanceled and Burdick Report, and help us solve this decades-long mystery. The Burdick Report is produced by Rising Youth Theater and me, Quinn Purcell. Thank you to my guest, Sarah Sullivan, and to Chris Van Allsburg for the source material. Thank you for listening, and as always, don't stop investigating the mysterious.